Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, June 9th. Tonight, the Bank of Canada warns of key risks to the Canadian financial system. It says vulnerabilities from high household debt and elevated housing prices have increased those risks. In its latest financial system review, the central bank says Canadian households, on average, have seen their net worth increase about $230,000 over the first 2 years of the pandemic. It says the increase is largely from soaring home prices, but also from the rising stock market and other gains. The bank says even more households have stretched themselves financially to purchase a home, and many may not be able to tap into home equity if housing prices slip. Following more than 2 years of pandemic-related travel, many Canadians are concerned that their vacation plans could be scrambled. This is because of a backlog in passport processing times. Between April 1st, 2021 and March 31st, 2022, nearly 1.3 million passports were issued. The federal forecast for 2022 to 2023 is between 3.6 million and 4.3 million applications. Based on projections from last week, Employment and Social Development Canada says 75% of Canadians who apply for a passport receive one within 40 working days. Canada and California have signed a new agreement on climate action and nature preservation. It's aimed at sharing information and best practices, focusing on biodiversity, clean air, and water. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Governor Gavin Newsom announced the deal this afternoon after they met in Los Angeles. The pair said the climate crisis won't be solved by either jurisdiction, but agreements like this are a step towards getting the world on board. On the East Coast, Nova Scotia's Public Accounts Committee heard yesterday about the multi-layered impact of low wages in the province. Christine Saulnier is the director of Nova Scotia's chapter of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and she told the committee the negative impact of a low-wage economy runs deep. Ms. Saulnier said low wages harm people's health and leaves people scrambling to cover their basic needs. She said this means that everyone must pay for the additional public health expenses and social benefits needed to fill those gaps. All right, turning to a new report from the Special Parliamentary Committee on Afghanistan, which says Canada needs an emergency mechanism to respond quickly to humanitarian crises. The report makes 37 recommendations for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. It follows a study of what happened after the Taliban swept into power in Afghanistan last August. Canada has been criticized for failing to act quickly enough to get people out of the country and resettle tens of thousands of vulnerable people as promised. Meanwhile, Canada's own defenses against foreign influences don't seem to be strong enough. An expert says foreign disinformation is now so pervasive it is sowing distrust in Canada's democratic institutions, including the federal government and media. A University of Calgary analysis finds that millions of tweets and retweets about the war in Ukraine can be traced back to Russia and China. Assistant Professor Jean-Christophe Bouche found evidence that pro-Russian tweets by U.S. influencers are also being retweeted by accounts associated with the Russian state. The Crown has dropped its case against a federal bureaucrat who was accused of leaking secret cabinet documents, and they were about a $700 million shipbuilding contract. Matthew Matchett walked out of an Ottawa courthouse as a free man. This after Justice Hugh McLean informed the jury hearing the breach of trust case about the Crown's decision. The Crown prosecutor's decision to stay the charge on Thursday comes more than 3 years after the Crown's case against Vice Admiral Mark Norman was dropped. Both had been accused of leaking information about the Liberal government's decision to delay approval of a contract that was to lease a civilian vessel from a Quebec shipyard for the Navy. Moving to the leadership race of the Conservative Party of Canada now, which says it has well over 600,000 voters who may be eligible to cast ballots for the next leader, and campaigns should prepare accordingly. The preliminary figures are more than double the number of members leadership hopefuls wrangled during the 2020 leadership race. This was when the party broke the record for most signups with 270,000. The city of Winnipeg has a new brand. The slogan is Winnipeg, made from what's real. It aims to attract tourism and investment in the city as it recovers from the economic effects of the pandemic. Officials say they are not concerned that the slogan could trigger backlash for being too vague or open-ended, just like the Manitoba Spirited Energy slogan. Stay with us. We have more news from around the world coming up shortly. One of the most notable changes in the world of investing during the pandemic was a sharp increase in younger investors. This is primarily thanks to the introduction of easy-to-use online investment apps like Robinhood and crypto exchange apps. According to a study from FINRA Investor Education Foundation, a large crop of new investors entered the market at the start of the pandemic. The survey conducted with NORC at the University of Chicago also found 38% of respondents who opened a non-retirement investment account in 2020 actually never had any investment account before. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing for these new investors. A study by Magnify Money found over half of young investors have regrets from last year. Well, joining us now to give us his advice on investing in this ever-evolving world is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Ltd. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Isn't it great to be young because you only have regrets that go back 1 year? You get to north of 50, you got regrets that go back decades. Being young is wonderful, isn't it? Sorry,
Definitely.
You had questions.
Definitely, Brendan. Now, as we mentioned, more than half of young investors have regrets from last year. Now, this was especially when it came to not investing enough money. So how do you avoid regretting your investment?
Well, start by investing some money. I would be surprised if, given the volatility, particularly the last 6 months, and the amount of Bitcoin that was purchased north of $50,000 a coin US, that all of the regrets are, oh gosh, I should have bought more. I think the first way to avoid regrets is to actually do something. Not everything that you could possibly do, and by no means should a young person borrow money to put it in the stock or any other sort of volatile market, because young people do have one advantage the old do not. They have time. You don't have to make all your money in a single year. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
And what would you say is the best investment at this time in terms of low, medium, and high risk investments?
Well, people put these in nice categories, and the thing that is low risk until it's total risk. So things that people have thought were low risk, like mortgage-backed securities in the financial crisis, were low risk until they weren't. Collateralized debt obligations were low risk until they weren't. So lots of things that were supposed to be low risk don't look out that way. So there is two types of investments. There is 100% government guaranteed, put it under a rock. And then there's investments that have some risk, and you could only guess at what that risk is before the fact. You'll only know it afterwards. So my thought is the important thing is to do something and then do something more and do something more. Build on whatever it is you're doing over time, because that's what young people have a lot of.
And meanwhile, we're seeing the markets really react negatively to world events. We saw that happening during the war in Ukraine. That's still going on. The pandemic, we're seeing inflation. So is this the best time to invest, Brendan, or should we wait a bit?
You should not wait. It's not because I know the market's going up, but if you're taking it from the point of view of someone who didn't do anything last year, they have regrets that they didn't do something last year, which is perhaps the question they were answering. Do something. Don't do everything, but let's say you have $10,000 to invest. Invest 1,000 of it. What in? High, low, medium risk? Well, invest in a company in which you know something about. The other advantage young people have is they know about these up and coming companies far more than I do because they actually use them. I'm not on any sort of social media except Ancestry. Yes, you can look up my DNA, but not what I had for lunch this afternoon. So if there's a new great high-tech thing, put $1,000 into that. And if it does well, you could say, thank goodness I have some money in that, and you can put another 1,000 in. If it does badly, if you find that yourself in a market that just keeps getting worse, then put another 1,000 in, because you will have the ability to dollar cost average your way, to take a fixed dollar amount and work out an average cost over time that will give you, if your investment is even halfway good, a decent entry price averaged out over a period of time.
Sounds like a little bit can go a long way, Brendan. A quick 45 seconds left here, but we're also seeing interests in real estate, investing in real estate. So how does investing in stocks compare to investing in real estate?
You can't live in a stock. And a stock is an intangible investment. It doesn't have any actual real substance to it. Most people's largest investment is in their home, or at least most older people. Younger people are wondering if they can ever buy a home. Well, if you think about it a little bit, like you think about Canada, you've got Vancouver and Toronto's real estate has gone through the roof, but there's other places, maybe even Montreal, where that haven't had the same move.
Always great advice, Brendan. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima.
The federal government says it's working on new measures to help ease delays at major airports. But Transport Minister Omar Al-Gabra says similar delays are happening around the world. The minister says working groups that include airports, airlines, public health, and federal officials are meeting up to 3 times a week in order to find solutions. But Mr. Al-Gabra says he's not yet ready to announce new measures. In addition, the issuing of passports has been delayed drastically. This is mainly due to the backlog of applications for new and renewed passports after 2 years of pandemic-restricted travel. Projections from last week from Employment and Social Development Canada say that 75% of Canadians applying for a passport will wait 40 business days before it's received. Well, joining us now to discuss these travel delays is Professor John Gradek, aviation expert and faculty lecturer and coordinator of the Aviation Management Program at McGill University. Professor Gradek, welcome to Forum Daily.
My pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's start with what's happening at the airport, sir. What sorts of delays can travelers expect to experience?
Well, I think that for the last 30 or some odd days, Pearson has become really a poster child for chaos at the airport. And it's really chaos both at departures and at arrivals. Primarily, the focus has been on congestion. So you have backups basically when you're leaving Pearson Airport, when you're going through security. There's a lot of passengers. There's a lot of people going through that funnel called security. And then when you arrive at Pearson, particularly on international flights, there has been experiences where people are waiting 3 hours on an airplane before they're allowed to disembark and then go through the CBSA entrance requirements for Canadian entry.
And how long do you think these airport delays will go on, sir?
I think that unless the finger pointing stops and people, in fact, get something done, it's going to go on. We're going to be in for a long, hot summer at Pearson.
And what do we know so far about how the government is reacting to this? What kind of actions is Transport Minister Omar Al-Gabra taking to address these delays?
Well, I think that, the government has reacted well. I think, they've done a lot of things in terms of, looking at, the testing requirement that's required for QRs for connection passengers. If you're arriving internationally and you've got a connection domestically, you don't have to go through the testing. Here's an airport, you can basically go to your final destination and take care of that once you get to where you're going to go. So that's a load off the capacity. The big issue really is the app, the ArriveCAN app, that really is seems to be the biggest bottleneck, and the minister has said that they're doing a lot of effort to basically make that app much more of a smartphone-enabled app rather than a desktop web-based app, so that people can in fact input all of their vaccination travel data into the ArriveCAN app on their smartphone, and that should speed up, the questioning taking place at sea.
All right, sir. Now, we also mentioned that Canadians are also facing passport application delays. So what's happening there?
Well, that's just a bureaucracy, the backlog in terms of the bureaucracy. I think that the agency that's in charge of issuing those passports knew that, there was going to be an influx of demand for passports, and they just did not react fast enough. I think that, they say they were caught by surprise. I don't know why it's a surprise. That tsunami of passenger travel, and everybody wanted to do what I call revenge travel. internationally should have been a sign on the wall for these guys to basically ramp up their staffing, take out, to process these passports quicker. But that did not happen. Canadians are waiting 45, 60, 75 days for it.
All right, Professor Gradek, about a minute left here, but do you have any advice for our Canadian viewers who might be planning to take an airline flight anytime soon for vacation? What can they do to prevent some of these delays?
I would have said 2 weeks ago, people were asking me that same question, and I was saying arrive early. If you're planning an international flight 3 hours early before departure, domestic 2 hours, but that doesn't seem to have fixed the problem. You're going to need a lot of patience. Have a lot of patience, smile, make sure you take it in. This is going to be a rough summer until you get all of our staff in place, whether it's CPSA, whether it's CATSA, whether it's airline employees. The airlines are short and the airports are short. So until they get their act together, they increase the staffing levels at the airports, we're going to be in a situation where the airports are going to be bogged down.
All right, Professor Gradek, thank you again. And we'll see you again on Forum Daily for another interview. Thank you for your time today, sir.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Stay with us. More news from around the world coming up after a short break. We'll be right back. The European Central Bank will raise interest rates next month for the first time in 11 years, followed by another hike this September. The bank made the surprise announcement on Thursday, saying inflation had become a major challenge. The ECB is catching up with other central banks worldwide in pivoting from supporting the economy during the COVID-19 pandemic to squelching inflation. It will also end its economic stimulus program next month. China's trade growth rebounded in May. This comes after anti-COVID-19 restrictions that shut down Shanghai and other industrial centers began to ease. The customs agency says exports surged 17% over a year earlier to $308.3 billion US. This is up from a growth of 3.7% in April. Imports rose 4% to $229.5 billion, accelerating from the previous month's increase of 0.7%. The human cost of the Russian war in Ukraine mounted on Wednesday. This came as workers pulled as many as 100 bodies from each destroyed building in the devastated southern port city of Mariupol. One official described the gruesome effort as an endless caravan of death. Additionally, fears of a global food crisis escalated over Ukraine's inability to export millions of tons of grain through its blockaded ports. Tensions continue to rise between Turkey and Greece. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has warned Greece to demilitarize islands in the Aegean Sea, and he says that he is not joking. Turkey says Greece has been building a military presence in violation of treaties that guarantee the unarmed status of the Aegean Islands. Greece and Turkey are both NATO allies, but the neighboring countries have a history of disputes over a range of issues. Greece maintains that Turkey has deliberately misinterpreted the Aegean treaties, and it says it has legal grounds to defend itself following allegedly hostile actions taken by Ankara. Well, nearby, Iran is removing 27 surveillance cameras from nuclear sites in the country. This is according to the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog. Rafael Mariano Grossi is the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and he suddenly called a news conference on Thursday in Vienna. On Wednesday, Iran said it shut off 2 devices that the agency uses to monitor enrichment at Natanz. Iranian officials also threatened to take more steps during a years-long crisis, which threatens to widen into further attacks. It is now legal to cultivate and possess marijuana in Thailand, but the country still discourages smoking pot and getting high. The government is also warning those eager to light up for fun that smoking in public could still be considered a nuisance subject to jail and fines. Thailand mainly wants to make a splash in the market for medical marijuana. The country's public health minister plans to begin distributing 1 million marijuana seedlings for cultivation on Friday. Moving to Cyprus now, where police say they have taken hold of servers that were used to sell Social Security numbers and other personal information. This information was stolen from 24 million U.S. citizens. A cybercrime official says 4 websites were taken down in a joint operation with the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service. A statement from the U.S. Department of Justice says that websites operated for years and generated more than $19 million in sales. The hacked personal information included names, birth dates, and social security numbers of U.S. citizens. Meanwhile, Facebook has failed yet another test of its ability to detect blatant violent hate speech in advertisements submitted to the platform. The test was by the nonprofit group Global Witness. The group created ads with dehumanizing hate speech. They were calling for the murder of people belonging to each one of Ethiopia's 3 main ethnic groups, the Amhara, the Oromo, and the Tigrayans. And Facebook's systems didn't catch the ads. The site also failed when Global Witness did a similar test with hate speech in Myanmar. Even worse, Facebook failed a second test after the group informed Facebook of their findings. A study has found that living close to a trail used for walking, running, or cycling might reduce the risk factors for heart disease. The study, led by researchers at the University of Manitoba, looked at Winnipeg residents who lived within 400 meters of 4 multi-use paths. And it found those people had slightly fewer health problems such as diabetes and high blood pressure. The study can be found in the International Journal of Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.